Hey everyone, welcome to today's project. We're talking about terrible thoughts. Terrible thoughts that make you think, well, am I a bad person for thinking that? And let's uncover some solutions today. Let's unravel the origins of why these thoughts come about. But what can we do with them and how can we perceive them in order for them to lose its power over us? Now, the first question is, why do we have these thoughts that tilt so far into the absurd, into the grotesque, into the extreme areas of life? And I think the comedians today walk down this fine line. They say the things that we think on occasion that we find ridiculous, but they say it out loud. And I think comedians tap into this part of the psyche, the shadow. They walk that medium of edginess, and that's what makes comedians. I love Ricky Gervais. He walks that edge. He says the things that we think but we dare not say, right? And those are the thoughts that make us cringe and go, oh my God, am I a bad person for thinking that thing? And so I think that we grant thoughts power by the amount of emotion we provide them. And how much you entertain the thought determines how long it sticks around. I think thoughts are like a spring, right? You try and push them away. You recognize it as something really terrible. You push it away, but it comes back up. It springs back up. Why? Well, let's look at the reaction to a thought, right? The reaction is, oh my God, that's terrible. I don't want to acknowledge that. You push it away. And I think when we push the thought away, the mind grants more curiosity around that particular thing that we're pushing away. It's like when you ignore the fact that Voldemort exists, there's part of your psyche that can't help but linger on Voldemort and linger on that fear that you're trying so desperately to push away. I think the mind always leans towards the unknown, and it wants to navigate the unknown. It wants to make sense out of the unknown. And I think the mind lingers more on what it doesn't understand, because what you don't understand could potentially do you in, and the mind needs a plan of action to what could potentially do you in so that it doesn't do you in. And I think a great example of the thoughts granting us power, or the thoughts producing more power over us, is the Malfoy example I thought of earlier. And in the Harry Potter series, Malfoy says some snarky things to Ron, Harry, Hermione, and they all react with such emotion. Ron, every time Malfoy enters the scene, he reacts so strongly to Malfoy's comment, and I think Malfoy's looking for that reaction. But what if you didn't grant Malfoy that reaction? What if Ron was like, yeah, you're probably right about that. Oh, yeah, it's okay, Malfoy. I love you too. It's like, if you didn't provide Malfoy, the bully, with that reaction, I think Malfoy would grow bored of Ron, Harry, and just bother somebody else. He's looking for that reaction. So what if when the thought comes up, it's like, what if you perceive it in a different way? What if you reframe that thought? What if you perceive that thought as a tool rather than something that could potentially do you in? Now, I like to use this thought of throwing the baby, right? Because we have these thoughts regularly and we think, well, I'm a bad person for thinking that. So we're holding a baby and we think about throwing the baby or dropping the baby, and you go, oh my God, I'm a bad person for thinking that. But then this is what I want you to do. Ask yourself this question: do I really want to? And I think when you really ask yourself this, the truth emerges. This is the truth. Well, no, I don't want to throw the baby. And you go, aha, right? Don't be so gullible, I guess you can say, to the first thought of throwing the baby and thinking of yourself as a bad person. Yeah, the mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. It doesn't. So when you think about throwing the baby, you're going to get a negative emotion, but then tell yourself the truth. Why are you getting a negative emotion? That's because you don't really want that to happen. Of course. And play out a different story. So ask yourself, do I really want this? No. What's a different story? Switch the movie in your mind's eye. The movie's playing out a situation that you don't want to happen. What do you want to happen? Imagine holding the baby, kissing the baby, the feel of the baby's skin on your skin. Change the story, change the scene. Then, this is the really important bit that I highly recommend you replay backwards. Replay this whole video because this is mind-boggling. The mind likes to navigate the possibilities in the unknown, right? We generate what could be in the mind. We have a potential job interview, we have a potential get-together, we have something important coming up. The mind likes to play out the situation, right? So you're holding this innocent baby. Someone or something could easily harm this baby. I could harm this baby. I could throw it. I could drop it. The mind is generating possibilities of harm to something vulnerable. The mind is playing out a simulation of the possibilities that could be possible, right? So the mind produces an avatar. It could be you, could be other people, it could be you and other people in the situation. So the mind produces this avatar of yourself in a situation and runs the simulation to determine if it's a good plan of action or not. That's huge. So the mind produces this avatar of you in this situation and runs through the simulation to determine whether this is a good plan of action or not. But most of us, we take this simulation that plays out in our minds as something true. That this is who I am. I'm a bad person for thinking that. Wrong. That's not the right way to perceive it. It's what you do with this simulation. That's the thing. The simulation is a tool on whether or not you should act on the situation. Whether you should go through with it. What's the outcome? Is it a bad outcome? Yeah, it's a bad outcome. It's causing me a lot of negative emotion. Well, change the outcome. What outcome do you want to happen? This is something I like to do. This is the manifestation meditation I like to do in the morning. Imagine how you want the situation to play itself out. A situation is making you anxious, fearful. Go through the situation. Play out the situation. Play out the simulation in a manner that produces an outcome you actually want. What are you going to do in that situation? How are you going to handle the problems? Look at yourself. Are you going to be confident or are you going to cower away, run away from this situation? How are you going to react? How are you going to respond to it? I think the mind produces these simulations in order to determine how to navigate them. So figure out how to navigate them. If you run through it in a positive, empowered way, you're going to get the results that follow. And I think this is really important to understand. So in the mind, go, well, that's not a good plan. How about another plan? And then reframe it. How can you go through this experience in a manner that will benefit your future self and that will make you feel empowered? And going through pornography recovery, for me, I objectified women quite a bit. And I was with Maggie going through this recovery. And I noticed that even though I was abstaining from pornography, my mind would still generate situations of myself with other women. And then in my mind, is this the path I want to follow? Is this the path I want to walk down? And I thought, well, no, let's tell myself a different story, and then I'll reframe it to romantic moments I would have with Maggie. And this produced a different story and it produced a different feeling. Lastly, because you are aware of these thoughts, of throwing the baby, for example, you are aware of the shadow parts of your psyche, the shadow side of yourself. Now, this shadow is the unexamined, unexplored aspects of your psyche. And we already talked about the exploration of these aspects. So if something is causing you fear or it's making you worrisome, well, I understand that, but maybe there's something there. The reason why you're worrying about it is because, well, you haven't explored it. You haven't reframed it. You haven't looked at it from a different angle. You're only looking at it from one narrow side. Open up your blinders to something different. What could be? I mean, if you're having a nightmare, this is what I highly recommend you do. If a nightmare is still plaguing you, I want you to sit with the nightmare, play out the nightmare, but then I want you to produce the outcome in a way that makes you feel empowered, the way you want it to go. Because a lot of people say, well, I have a nightmare and I can't seem to get to a place. I can't seem to, my hands are tied together and I feel helpless, or I feel weak, or I feel trapped. Okay, play out that scenario in your mind, and I want you to escape, untie yourself, hit the murderer, if you're afraid of a robber coming through your window, what will you do to protect yourself? Maybe you need a bat, maybe you need a dog, maybe you need some sort of spray. Maybe you need to show yourself that you could be independent and you can defend yourself from the perceived threat. And that's where I'm going to leave you today on this video. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Leave your comments below. If anything resonated with you, please share this with someone you know. It'll greatly benefit. And lastly, rise above anxiety. I'll see you next time. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell so that whenever a new video of mine appears, you will be one of the first to know. Namaste.